In a world where players immerse themselves in Aether World, a popular dating simulator, the game's characters vary in difficulty, from easy and efficient to challenging and inefficient. Among them is Baek Yuseol, a character almost universally avoided due to his complete lack of magical abilities in a game set in a magical world. The story begins with the main character, an avid player, sitting at his computer and scrolling through posts on the game forum. Expecting news about a new update due to the recent spike in activity, he instead finds the forum buzzing with discussions about a dark demon dragon that is easily defeating players. Some speculate it's a bug. The main character is baffled. How could there be a boss in a dating sim? As he continues reading, he comes across a post by a well-known ranker who claims the boss is unbeatable because of its near-perfect magic resistance and powerful magic absorption abilities. Players' characters are even being deleted. The main character initially assumes it's a glitch, but soon recalls the game's lore. The story mentions a cult-like organization called the Dark Demonic Humans, whose goal is to aid an otherworldly entity in taking over. He realizes that 90% of the continent has already fallen under their control. Up until now, the main character has only focused on PvP, player versus player gameplay, ignoring the storyline arcs, but the situation seems completely out of place. Accepting that he can't avoid the monster, he launches the game and chooses Baek Yuseol, the character no one plays. Despite having no magical abilities, Baek Yuseol has mastered the Blink spell, which allows him to teleport randomly. The skill is considered dangerous because uncontrolled distances can be fatal, and it comes with a cooldown and a high mana cost. However, Baek Yuseol can control the direction and distance perfectly, and since he has no mana, it costs him nothing. No mana, no problem, right? Using Blink, Baek Yuseol repeatedly slashes at the dragon, ultimately defeating it. A notification appears, declaring that he has slain the 13th moon of the Black Knight. Feeling triumphant, the main character prepares to boast on the forums, but a red, flashing notification interrupts him. It declares that he has reached the wrong ending, and 90% of Aether World has been destroyed. Stressed and unable to process what just happened, he suddenly finds himself transported. He opens his eyes and discovers he's now wearing a brown robe and a white t-shirt lying on the floor. Shocked, he looks into a nearby mirror and realizes he has been transported into the game as his character, Baek Yuseol. A notification appears, instructing him to escape the chase. Welcome to your new reality. Coming to terms with this bizarre situation, he remembers the earlier notification about the true ending, something no player has ever achieved despite the game's multiple endings. He checks his pocket and finds an entrance certificate to Stella Academy. Just then, the hut he is in is surrounded by figures in black robes. Outside, the snowy field is silent except for their movements as they search for Baek Yuseol. Panicked and unsure how to fight or outrun them, he suddenly receives a notification enabling him to use the Blink skill. Surprised, he mutters, "I can use this skill." Another notification explains the details. The skill is class 0, allows a maximum distance of 9 meters, and has only one charge. As the men close in, he wonders how to activate Blink without a keyboard and mouse. With no time to spare, he decides to try it. Sprinting toward the door, he hears the group shouting behind him, "Don't let him escape!" Yuseol relied solely on his skill, unlike his pursuers, who wore magic boots that enhanced their speed. Though he had never used the skill in real life, he steadied himself, trusting his knowledge of its timing. One of the men shouted at him to stop, raising his sword and coming dangerously close to striking. At the last moment, Yuseol activated Blink and reappeared ahead, leaving the men confused. As they tried to make sense of what had happened, one of them remarked that Yuseol must have used Blink, a spell that should have left him unable to move for 2 seconds. But their confusion grew when they saw him already moving at incredible speed. Yuseol ran as fast as he could, using the terrain to his advantage. Most players struggled to control Blink during the opening quest, but Yuseol skillfully maneuvered through the landscape, keeping ahead of his pursuers. The group quickly adjusted, calling for magic users to move to the front and attack from a distance. This marked the second part of the tutorial, where surviving the flying arrows became the main challenge. Yuseol received a notification indicating that Magic Leakage Syndrome, Sixth Sense, and Cognitive Acceleration were active. These abilities barely allowed him to dodge the incoming arrows. Timing it perfectly, he used Blink again and managed to escape temporarily. Yuseol soon reached a canyon, the setting for the third part of the tutorial. The only way to cross was by perfectly controlling the distance of his Blink. A mistimed spell would result in falling into the canyon. The instructions required him to cancel the Blink spell within 0.1 seconds at the precise moment to succeed. Yuseol muttered under his breath, frustrated by the difficulty of the task. His situation worsened when he saw his pursuers closing in, now only 100 meters away. With Blink still on a 3-second cooldown, he realized he wouldn't make it across in time. Left with no other option, he decided to confront them. Hiding behind a rock, Yuseol questioned his plan, knowing he had never been in such a situation before. If this was still a game, he thought, the system would likely prevent him from engaging his pursuers directly. But this wasn't a game, it was reality. No rules restricted him now. These were the same people responsible for the destruction of everything he had once known, but Yuseol didn't focus on the past. His priority was survival. The group drew closer, shouting for his capture. Yuseol activated Blink, precisely moving a distance of 8.6 meters, and used a small blade to disable one of his pursuers, forcing them to retreat. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept going. Survival was all that mattered now. As the group hurried to close the gap, Yuseol began running again, aware that the next encounter would be tougher. Suddenly, the area fell silent. A sense of unease swept over him. Looking up at the mountain slope, he saw his pursuers standing still, chanting a spell. A fireball formed and sped toward him with alarming speed. Just as the attack was about to strike him, Yuseol used Blink in a split second. The group assumed he was gone, but he reappeared mid-air and struck another pursuer, catching the remaining members completely off guard. Now only 2 opponents remained on top of the mountain, but Yuseol knew he had to act fast before the others arrived. One of the men, who had a scar across his face, commented that Yuseol was surprisingly quick for a mage. Yuseol, however, realized he couldn't keep evading attacks, especially at such close range. He needed to end the confrontation swiftly. The scar-faced man, noticing that Yuseol only had Blink and a dagger, shifted to a defensive stance and used his Ice Wave skill. Yuseol dashed forward, used Blink, and struck the other opponent before he could react, horrifying the scar-faced man. The man, who had believed Yuseol was a coward relying on sneak attacks, hesitated. Yuseol responded coolly, thanking him for helping improve his tactics. Now taking Yuseol seriously, the scar-faced man prepared to attack. Yuseol threw his spear toward the man, who assumed it was a diversion to lure him into defending his front, while Yuseol struck from the side. Anticipating this, the man turned to block a side attack. Instead, Yuseol used Blink to reappear directly in front of him and delivered a precise strike. A notification immediately appeared. Escape successful. Exhausted, Yuseol fell to the ground. Another notification popped up, stating he had earned a reward for uniquely developing the Constellation Project storyline. Yuseol picked up the dagger nearby and glanced back at the fallen opponents. Though he didn't feel good about what had happened, he reminded himself that he had acted out of necessity. He noticed a small pouch on one of the fallen men and decided to take it. Inside, he found around 2 million credits, a useful, if bittersweet, reward for his survival. With that, Yuseol turned his focus to the real challenge, crossing the canyon. Suddenly, he heard voices from the other side. It was the group of mages he was originally supposed to meet. They called out, asking if he could cross. Yuseol replied confidently and told them to wait. One of the mages remarked that crossing the canyon required the strength of a third-class knight, and it was unlikely for someone as young as Yuseol to succeed. But Yuseol had already begun, using his Blink spell to leap across the boulders. One of the mages speculated he might be using a jumping skill, but a girl with blue hair and a dark robe insisted it was Blink. The others questioned her, pointing out that controlling both the distance and direction of Blink was supposed to be impossible. Yuseol made it halfway across the canyon when 2 enemy mages appeared behind him and launched spells in his direction. He dodged the attacks using his skill, but with Blink on a 3-second cooldown, avoiding every blast was impossible. He frantically searched for the next floating stone to use as a foothold. A dark spell nearly struck him, grazing his hair as he ducked. With no nearby stones to reach, he used Blink again and barely grabbed onto one of the rocks. But before he could regain his balance, another fireball came speeding toward him. Convinced this was the end, he braced himself, only for an ice spear infused with lightning magic to intercept the attack at the last second. Yuseol was stunned. He wondered who could have cast a dual attribute spell so precisely during the tutorial. Looking back, he saw it was the blue-haired girl from the other side. Her magic was enough to scare off the 2 enemy mages, who fled immediately. Finally safe, Yuseol crossed the remaining distance and approached the group of mages. He thanked the blue-haired girl, but she simply replied that she hadn't done it for gratitude and told him not to overthink it. Yuseol thought the blue-haired girl had the prettiest voice he had ever heard, but she seemed difficult to approach. Reflecting on the earlier events, he realized the people who tried to kill him weren't ordinary bandits. They were working for the Dark Demon cult. Despite this, Yuseol felt relieved knowing he was now in the company of the mages and that the demonic cultists wouldn't be able to pursue him any further. A few minutes later, he received a notification instructing him to enroll in Stella Academy, which marked the beginning of the second episode. Traveling with the mages in a horse-drawn carriage, Yuseol became lost in thought. Suddenly, a series of vivid flashbacks overtook him. He remembered telling his mother as a child that he would become a mage one day. She had smiled warmly and told him she believed in him. Young Yuseol had studied diligently, poring over a book his parents had worked hard to buy for him. He recalled his mother finding him asleep one evening and gently covering him with a blanket. The memory shifted to a more somber moment, a conversation with a doctor. Yuseol and his mother listened as the doctor explained that he had magic leakage syndrome. The younger Yuseol couldn't accept the devastating news. Snapping back to reality, Yuseol questioned whether those memories were truly his or simply part of the game's storyline. By the time he returned to the present, morning had arrived. A mage informed him that they were nearing Lezoicha, the satellite city of Arcanium. Exhausted from the journey, the group stopped to rest outside the carriage. Yuseol tried to approach the blue-haired girl, but she scoffed at him and walked away. He shrugged it off, thinking how grateful he was that the game's timeline resembled modern times more than the Middle Ages. While magic existed in Aether World, its cities were equipped with advanced infrastructure, including trains, flying ships, and teleportation poles. The group was heading to Lezoicha to board a flying ship, which would take them to Arcanium, where the second episode of the game truly began. Arcanium, also called the City of Magic, was a renowned hub of magical learning and power. It housed towering mage structures, prestigious mage knight orders, and 5 elite academies. Among these, Stella Academy stood out as the most powerful and prestigious, attracting geniuses and nobles from all over the world. Yuseol still couldn't understand how he had gained admission to such an elite institution. Curious, he opened his system menu to review his skills. He reflected on how his sixth sense had saved his life multiple times already. His cursed condition, magic leakage syndrome, made it impossible for him to accumulate mana. However, it gave him a unique ability to sense the flow of mana in his surroundings. This sixth sense allowed him to detect incoming threats, even those outside his line of sight, and react as though time had slowed down. It was a critical skill for someone like him who couldn't rely on traditional magic. However, using it came at a steep cost, draining his mental energy significantly and leaving him exhausted. Yuseol sighed as he continued analysing his stats, knowing how crucial these abilities were to his survival. Yuseol thought his starting stats weren't bad. The original Baek had low sensitivity, but the character had adapted to the player's attributes after 10 years of gameplay in Aether World. In the game, each stat had its own level, and skills were measured in form levels, while stats were represented in stars. The maximum stat level was 9 stars, but reaching the highest level was practically impossible. Even after a decade of gameplay, the main character could only achieve 8 stars in both stamina and sensitivity. Yuseol decided to invest in sensitivity to enhance his sixth sense, reaction speed, and flexibility, knowing that stamina and other attributes could be improved through training. However, his biggest concern was magic leakage syndrome. Without proper training, his condition could lead to his downfall. He needed to upgrade to the secrets of nature physique as soon as possible, a solution that could only be found within Stella Academy. This meant he had no choice but to attend Stella, not only to treat his syndrome, but also to stop the looming end of the world. He sighed, wishing for some immediate help to ease his burden. The group boarded the carriage again, which fast-forwarded their journey to a flying ship bound for Arcanium. The ship was elegantly furnished with classy decor, but Yuseol drew the attention of a few upper-class students. Mocking his rugged clothes, they called him a country bumpkin and complained that Stella Academy shouldn't allow peasants to enroll, arguing it was meant for the elite. Yuseol, however, ignored them, simply sighing and walking away. This nonchalant reaction angered a pink-haired boy who couldn't believe Yuseol had brushed off their taunts so casually. Before the boy could retaliate, a beautiful white-haired girl passed by, capturing everyone's attention. She ignored the commotion and headed straight to her seat. The girl's name was Hongbyun Adolabit, a prominent figure in the game and one of its main characters. Known as the world's villainess, her fate was tragic. No matter the route, her story ended in disaster, whether through murder, bullying that drove her away from the academy, or shameful events that caused her to disappear from public life. Meanwhile, Yuseol climbed the stairs to grab some food, but found the prices exorbitant. Deciding to wait until they reached Arcanium, he returned to his seat. Moments later, an announcement informed the passengers that they would be arriving in 10 minutes.
You a little bit too hard. Up it on him. Gang. This Picasso art motherfucker killed Gara, bro. What we doing? Fuck Daedra, bro. Hit him with a point.